Several years ago, a visitor from overseas came and critiqued evangelism in Australia, and among their complaints, this is what they said. I came here expecting to learn a great deal about evangelism. I have learnt about church structures, praise, organisation and leadership training, all of which is essential. But in my limited experience, I'm not convinced that evangelism is a strong point. There's a little bit of a sense of living on past glories, seeking to maintain legacies. I remember reading those words when they were published, and they hurt. It was a painful remark to read. And the reason it was painful was because of the truth at the centre of it. It is true that we struggle with evangelism, and that in Australia we can often look back to yesteryear to think, gee, how good things used to be. But how do we ensure that we keep evangelism at the forefront of what we do today? What are some principles and strategies for knowing how to do this, and how we apply those in our context to ensure we're not just living off the past of glories and legacies of yesteryear, but we're learning from those, and so we are equipped to be effective tools in the hand of our great God in order to reach Australia. Today, we're joined by Rico Tice. Rico is an author, speaker, evangelist, co-author and creator of Christianity Explored and Life Explored evangelistic courses, in addition to being the Senior Minister for Evangelism at All Souls, Langham Place in London. Rico, g'day mate, great to have you here. Now listen, you're a great friend of Christians in Australia. You've actually been here before, and yet you're still living in England. What on earth are you doing? Why are you still there? Why haven't you moved here by now? What's going on?
Yeah, look, just to say on that introduction, I mean, I just want to pause a bit and say Chapo was a one-off and once in 100 years. So the fact that, you know, that person says, well, look, you're looking back. I mean, we're the same with John Stott at All Souls. You know, you get this gift of a man, and you're just not going to be in the same place as that. So, I mean, I'm unbelievably grateful to Chapo. But if that's saying, yeah, you haven't got a Chapo around now, well, Chapo was such a gift to the worldwide church.
Yeah, one of those rare gifts that God is kind enough.
Yeah, he was, and so you're not going to be. I mean, it was just absolutely thrilling going to Sydney and meeting him, and also his interpersonal skills. I mean, he was just so delightful. There were times when I honestly thought, if he doesn't be quiet, I'm going to be sick. I was laughing so much. I had a relational bust up when I went over to him, and I'm not kidding. He just laughed me out of it, and a couple of occasions I was just weeping. So, but also such a love for people, such clarity on the gospel. So if somebody says, well, you're not where you were, well, we're not where we were with Uncle John. I mean, we've lost John Stott. We just keep going, but you get these men that like comments. You just got to give thanks. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. Well, what can you expect? I mean, it was going to Sydney with Chapo and Dave Mansfield, organised the trip, and I spent a bit of time there, probably 2 or 3 trips, absolutely foundational, and I'm so grateful. But I don't think you can compete with that.
Absolutely. I've been rereading your book, your wonderful book, Honest Evangelism, and you've got a very, very interesting backstory and background. You're born in Chile. You became a Christian in high school from a non-Christian family in England, and you actually tell the story. It's a startling story of the persecutions you faced immediately upon being a Christian in England. So can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, how you became a Christian, and how those early experiences, I suppose, shaped you looking forward?
Yeah, my dad was in tobacco, so he made cigarettes. Wasn't a particularly spiritual career, and he was in Chile, where I got my name Rico Tice, just to say it's not Tico Rice. I spent my life being called Tico Rice. Then we went to Africa, where he grew tobacco, and we went to mission schools, because that's where the expat kids went. And I'm sure we were prayed for in those mission schools. There were all these missionaries up country that sent their kids back to be educated, which is another story in itself. But we went along, and then 10 years later, when I was over in England, interestingly, at a boarding school, I've just about recovered now, I'm just about through the experience, but I get sent to a boarding school when I'm 8, and I got converted because my parents sent me away, because there was a maths teacher, an evangelical, in the boarding house we were in, and my brother said to him, because my brother was getting confirmed, which was just a formal thing, he said, I try to do the right thing, but I just keep repeatedly doing the wrong thing, and I say sorry to God, but it doesn't seem to make much difference. And so he he just said this in a house tutor, 1-to-1. And from there, my brother went to a little Christian meeting, the guy rang, and then I followed, and about 20 of us were converted.
Wow.
The great thing about it was, Dave, was that the magazines were pretty much immediately written. And so I immediately encountered the cost. And that's why, by the way, I as an evangelist, like all the LGBT stuff and the gay movement, because it enables me to immediately say to the non-Christian, I'm reading the Bible 1-to-1 with a Hindu guy at the moment, but I sent him a little film about the whole battle in the Church of England at the moment. It immediately lets him count the cost. You're immediately in Mark 8:34, take up your cross and follow me. And you've got to establish that. And because we believe in the Holy Spirit, we believe he will yet call people, but they've got to see the price of it. And so, at school, and of course, the trouble is, even if a boarding house is like Lord of the Flies, they just don't know when to stop. And so it was brutal. And I actually had to see a psychiatrist after a broken engagement in 2003 because of the sort of drivenness and the stuff I had to unpack. But I am grateful that the Lord just showed me that this is going to be suffering. And I think, just for the pastors listening, let's remember, often our best young workers come from very tough situations. They've had to stand, and so let's not be afraid of that. And so that was the school. The other thing, of course, I was immature and I wasn't well taught, and so I didn't understand about sharing your life with people at the school. I tended to just try and speak the gospel to them. But but nevertheless, even at school, standing up for the gospel and telling people the gospel, it's the Luke 15, there's joy in finding the lost. People were coming to faith in God's kindness, and that was exciting.
Did that experience, not just of suffering, but I suppose 20 people becoming Christians, seeing other people become Christians, is that what instilled in you that, I suppose, the burden for the lost and the sense of the need to evangelize? Of course, I only say it because many Christians, some listening, or certainly some in our churches, if we're pastors or church leaders, many Christians never evangelize. And they never have that second conversion, if you like, where they're sort of seeing, I have a deep need to tell people about Jesus here.
Yeah.
You reference this in your book. But what was it for you that twigged, that actually went, oh my goodness, I do need to cross the pain line here. I do need to tell people about Jesus regardless of the cost. What drove you personally?
Well, two things, I think. First of all, the school chaplain, within 6 months of me getting converted, I realized was not a Christian and was not telling people the gospel. And brother, that isn't, John Stott used to say, there are various motives for ministry. Love is one, but another is anger at false teaching. And, this chaplain would say to people, at confirmation, you get a ticket to go to heaven. And it was seeing my contemporaries being told a false gospel. I can remember thinking I'd do a better job than the chaplain when I was 16, because at least I believe it. So I think finding, and of course we're seeing it now in the Anglican Church in this country, seeing Christian leaders, so-called Christian leaders, who are serving themselves and feeding themselves and refusing to tell the real gospel, that is enraging. I just found that terrible. And secondly, I just believed what Jesus said about hell. I thought he said that because it was true. So I always say to people, there's only one way to hell. You have to trample over the cross of Jesus. He blocks the way to hell. He says, don't go. I'm paying in death and blood to stop you going. But if you want to go, you trample over the cross. But I come from a family of people who generation after generation have paid for their sin themselves in hell. So I remember at my grandmother's funeral, and she had clearly rejected Christ. Of course, as Chapel would say, I leave her in God's hands, but I have no hope she's in heaven, really. My brother, who was the only other Christian in the family, he'd been converted in that same school, burst into tears in the middle of the reading. And I was the only one in church who knew why. I knew he was weeping because he knew that in all likelihood, he'd never see his beloved grandmother again. So I think if you really do believe in hell, I just think that's a huge thing, brother. And so I love what Frank Retief says. We should have this as a mission statement in all our churches. We all have various mission statements. My personal mission statement is this: people without Christ go to hell. So I want to organize my time. And Frank Retief, in down in Cape Town gets people to walk. And now we've got to get the tone right. We've got to say it with tears. But Jesus is the theologian of hell. He says it again and again. Now, if I believe that and I love people, why can I not warn them? And I've found the logic of that has never left me, really.
Many people in our churches would say, Rico, that's okay for you. You're a gifted evangelist. Many pastors would say, who struggle to find the time to fit in meetings and catch-ups with non-Christian people, would say, well, Rico, you have the gift, obviously. And for many of us in pastoral ministry, we're encountered with that objection all the time. How do you respond to people who say, well, hold on, Rico, you're gifted, I'm not. So you do that, I don't do that.
Well, no, as Chapo would say, we always have an eagle in our stomach before we talk to people. That's why that phrase, the pain line, is one I sort of made up. It's my says he pompously, it's my phrase. But
we're stealing it. I hope you don't mind.
Well, But, let's do Chapo. Whether I accept or reject you doesn't make me more valuable. What makes me valuable is Christ died for me. That was the classic Chapo line. So I've got to have my identity in the gospel. But then in saying when I talk to people, often I'll say, look, because I'm going to say something now, it's a heavy thing, but because you're a friend, I hope you'll hear it from me, but I'm nervous about saying it. And then one of the things I have actually is, I won't get it out, but I have a packet of cigarettes I keep with a warning. And I said, and it's got smoking will kill. And I have that. And I say, look, if I got this out and smoked it, would you say something? Because, of course, my dad made cigarettes. But, a good mate would say, mate, it says it on the packet. What are you doing? So I often show people the packet. I have my cigarette packet. And I say, look, if I don't give you this warning, now what you do with this warning is up to you, mate. Honestly, your blood is not on my hands then, but I have to give you the warning, just as you would probably say, Rico, is that wise to be smoking? I'm going to have the odd one, but really it's not wise with what we know. So I use my cigarette packet to cross the pain line. I say, look, as a mate, I've got to give you the information. Now it's up to you what you do, but please just say, Rico, you gave it to me.
Yeah.
By the way, we're going to get rejected. That's the other thing. We sort of think, the English, we're so pathetic. We sort of think if we're cool enough or charming enough or, middle class enough, people won't reject us. But Jesus said, they hated me, they're going to hate you. So I think, again, in the evangelism training, I always start my evangelism training with a question. What stops you doing evangelism? Because otherwise it's not real. So the first question when you train for evangelism is that question, because then everyone gets out what stops them. And then, of course, the big thing that stops them is fear. And you say, yeah, we're all scared, but our identity's got to be in the gospel. And so, again, Chapo, whether you accept or reject me doesn't make me valuable. Christ died for me is what makes me valuable. And then we try and go forward from there. Yeah. So I get my cigarettes out, Dave, and I say, look, I've got to do it. But, the other thing is we're sick of spin. So someone who tells you the truth, over here we have this dance program. And there's a gay guy called Greville Hawkins, who's the last one to speak, and he's the only one who's honest. And so when you watch it with your wife, because you have to watch it because she likes it, and so we're all waiting for him because we know he's going to tell the truth. And it's the same with Simon Cowell. But the tone, what we've learned is tone. We've got to be, Chapo's line, I'm for you. Chapo was always so big on that. In my golf swing, as I'm speaking to you, I'm for you. And the second thing in my swing is I believe in the Holy Spirit, and I'm therefore going to speak. But and then the Tim Keller thing again is I say, by the way, you want to believe in judgment and hell, and they go, no, I don't. I say, no, you do, because how I treat you, how you treat me, and how I treat the world matters to God. So I say, so actually, mate, you do. Now you don't want it for you, or perhaps for loved ones, but you do want it, because let's face it, Mengele, who killed hundreds of children in Auschwitz, the doctor, he died swimming off the coast of Brazil in 1979. He had a lovely life. His family paid for him, a pharmacist's family paid for him, and he just kept moving, but he died swimming. So we want there to be a judgment. So it's working at it. But yeah, we got to say it. But I always say, look, I'm a bit nervous about saying this because the relationship's valuable. But can I give you the information? Then it's up to you what you do with it.
Christianity Explored and now Life Explored have been a blessing to the church around the world and have been so for the last few decades. Can you explain for us, I suppose, your journey to the conviction that the format and the content of Christianity Explored initially was something that you wanted to be involved in. How you came, to put it all together, but also I suppose then now looking back and in the middle of it with Life Explored again, why are you still convinced? Hold on, these short-term video courses, if that's the option that you choose, in a Bible study or a bigger group, that actually this is something that you are convinced works and you'd encourage others to do?
Well, brother, we're not to talk too much about COVID, but on that one, can I tell you, the pandemic's been amazing because, of course, people are coming online, so the walls have gone down. So I can even bring a friend from Australia if he's a big mate or a relative. So there's been a massive boost. We're never going to stop running courses online now, whatever happens.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit like the footy or whatever it is. You can't just go to the ground now. You've got to watch it on the media. So we're going to do the same with this. We're always going to be running courses. So that's the first thing. The walls of one of the blessings of this pandemic, there have been lots the Lord's taught us, is that people can come online. They can get in from work at 8 o'clock. They can plug in. Now we're still trying to work up follow-up, but once they're in a small group, and also, if you're my best mate in Sydney, you can bring me from London. We can do this now. So people go with their friends. So it's just been an extraordinary revolution, and we are elated at the number of churches that are running CE again and using it online. Yeah. Why did I use it? Okay, it's always good to have a middle-class Englishman on one of these things, and for me to say something arrogant, I always think it's funny. It's only people with my accents, such as the political correctness today, that can be totally slated. But here's my arrogant statement, but I believe it with all my heart. If we said to God, what's the best way to do evangelism? There are lots of good ways, but what's the best way? I am convinced the Lord would say to us, why don't you go through the books I've given you about my son? So the best way to do evangelism is to let the gospel tell the gospel. And evangelism is teaching the Bible to non-Christians. And so with Christianity Explored, that's what we're doing. We're saying, let's just look at this together. Look at the person of Christ. Would you do that? Will you, I'm ashamed of lots about the Christian church. It was Swinburne who said, I would love Christ were it not for his leprous bride, the church. But I'm not ashamed of him, and let's look at him. And you can ask any question. But then when we ran the courses, Dave, what we were doing was we were, as evangelists, preparing people to be discipled in a church and preparing them to sit under the authority of the pastor as he taught the Bible. And so the way we do that is that as they come to faith, the way they come is the way they stay. So how do they come? Well, they get a talk from the front. They discuss it in a small group. They chat one-to-one, and they take it home to read it. So week 1 of Christianity Explored, we are modeling the power in the Christian life. As Chapa used to say on the Bible, when people would come and say, well, the Bible's not working, Chapa would say, well, I've got nothing else to offer you. That's what I'm offering. And that's how I've run these courses. People, but I'm saying what we have to have is not biblical pulpits, but biblical churches. So I sometimes say to people, would you score yourself out of 10, the first church you were at? Quality of preaching from the front, by the way, Sydney with Moore College, probably that's the best in the world in terms of the number of people who are faithfully teaching the Bible and trying to teach it relevantly. Small group out of 10. How good was the small group? If there's no small group, they get 0 out of 10. Was there any one-to-one? Now that's the crisis we've got in Britain. The generation above me was not brought up to do one-to-one stuff, which is why the word one-to-one and things like that are so important. And then lastly, read it for myself at home. And quite often when people score themselves out of 10, they go 6 for the preaching, 4 for the small group, 0 for one-to-one, 5 for reading it at home. And particularly as the culture hardens, that ability to track the individual and stay with them is, I think, humanly speaking, how people are being defined and coming to faith. So, the video of about the gay issue that I sent to this Hindu guy I'm reading with one-to-one at the moment, I've sent it to him so he can count the cost. He's not yet converted, but we're friends, and every week I'm on the phone and we do the Bible together each Sunday night at 9 o'clock in the evening. But we're mates. I'm in his life, and I think it's that one-to-one that's key. But with Christianity Explored, yeah, mate, I was saying, let's let the gospel tell the gospel, and then the next thing to say. Sorry if I'm going a bit quick here, but the next thing is the amazing thing on Mark's gospel is this: we discovered that just about every verse in Mark's gospel was either about the identity of Jesus, who he is, or the mission of Jesus, why he came, or the call of Jesus, what it means to follow him. And then the fourth word is blindness. From chapter 1, verse 1, we're told the beginning of the gospel about Jesus Christ, the Son of God, but the disciples are blind. So the drama in Mark is the disciples are blind, the religious teachers are blind, everyone's blind, apart from blind Bartimaeus who gets his eyes opened. Everyone's blind. The women at the end of it are blind, which is why they run and hide. Can you see? And that drama takes you through Mark. And then when people see you can do Mark's gospel with 4 words, they suddenly go, well, if it's 4 words, I can do that. Blindness to identity, mission, call. So it's the simplicity, Dave, that makes people feel they can do it. Often I'll get 3 highlighters and I'll say, listen, colour in Mark's gospel on identity, mission, call. You'll colour the whole gospel in. Now, let me do something that will mean that they'll never have me at Moore College, Dave. Here's a little game, okay? Give me a number between 1 and 16.
14.
Any number.
14.
And give me a number between 1 and 35.
6.
Okay, so Mark 14, verse 6 will be one of those 3. It will be identity, mission, or call. Let's have a quick look, and I'll read it out to you, and then you can tell me who's blind to what in Mark 14, verse 6. Here we go. Okay, what's going on here? Verse 6. Some of those present were saying indignantly, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her. Leave her alone, Jesus said. Oh, my goodness, this is amazing. The one you've got here. Oh, brother, you're being, honestly, I feel like, look at you. Leave her alone. What are you bothering her? She's done a beautiful thing for me. So this woman has anointed Jesus' feet and she's preparing him for death. So that's his mission. Can you see what she's doing? The disciples are blind. They don't know what the perfume's for. Jesus says she knows. She can see. Can you see? Now, brother, we just picked that verse out. But the thrilling thing of Mark's gospel is that every verse is identity, mission, call. Someone's blind. Can you see it? And then people think, well, I can go through the gospel now. I could do that.
How have you seen?
Let's not do it. Let's not do that one again because you'll never get as good a one as Mark 14.
That's right. It's done.
Let's just leave that. We'll take that. We'll take that.
I'm sure you've seen CE, Christian Export and Life Export have been used in, so many countries around the world for such a long time. And I'm sure you've heard of different ways that it's been run in particular contexts. You're in an urban context in London. A city, so not urban, a city context in London, workers. How does it work in your context? When I say how does it work, what I mean to say is the pragmatics of how you run this thing. Many churches would say, well, we've tried courses before. We've done it. We've given it a go. There must be something else. Or they think they put too much emphasis on it, thinking it's the silver bullet that's going to solve everything.
Yeah.
But how have you seen it work best in a way that sees people converted and also brings the church along without undermining the individual responsibility for evangelism?
Well, great question. Here's my little diagram here. Do you see at the top is the top of the triangle? That's courses and events. Underneath is the one-to-one, and that's what brings people. You see, so quite often we do the courses, we do the events, and we expect people just to be there. But the key is mobilizing the church family for one-to-one, trying to do some training so they'll bring people, teaching them to talk about hell or whatever it is. So brother, it's now you've got to get the church calendar. If you're a young curate, you arrive at a church, the first battle, the first hill you die on is you say, twice a year, can we have a couple of weeks leading into a Christianity Explored course beginning? And maybe that will be spring and autumn. So you've got to have it. It can't be a bolt-on. It's there. You're going to get there. You're going to run it. But then what I'm trying to do is get the church family to bring friends and do some training in personal evangelism. Now, for that to happen, Dave Bro, here's the first thing. And again, Chapo was huge on this. The speed of the lead is the speed of the team. So I say to everyone getting a new job at a church, I say, can you please cut out half a day a week that is part of your job? It's not family time when you're doing evangelism. So you're with non-Christians, you're playing a game of golf, you're doing and that'll keep you fit too. So the first thing is the pastor, brothers, I can hear you hearing this, but the pastor's got to model it. If the pastor doesn't model bringing friends, the church family doesn't think it's important. So with me at All Souls, my boss was Hugh Palmer, and before that, Richard Buse. if they're not doing personal evangelism and if their wives aren't, the church family don't think it's important. But that means make sure the elders give you half a day a week so that every week I do chess club. This is before COVID, 8 a.m. Wednesday morning with my two boys. There's a chess club at 8 a.m. But I'm in amongst the boys, then I'm in amongst their parents. I play golf. There's a guy who I go to the swings with. But there's a mini rugby on Saturday morning. I'm just saying, if I'm not modeling it, the church family won't think it's important. So I'd begin there. Then what you do is you find your passionate advocates, the people who really do it and are great bringers. And you want to encourage them and interview them about how they're going and what's happening. And then you set up a calendar and some events. But I think it's that modeling of it. And then there are 4 steps that, Dave, I'm always trying to train the church family, and I'm always saying these are the 4 steps. Step 1, celebrate people. So be confident of Acts 17, 24 to 28, that the creator, sustainer, and ruler has not just decided where you live, he's decided where the non-Christian lives. And that's also that verse 27, Acts 17, people can meet Jesus, which means that on my street, I'm the most important person anyone knows because I know Jesus. And it's the confidence of divine appointments. And what I then do is when I meet someone, I'm going, God's planned for me to meet them because he's in control and he's sovereign. So that's the first thing. Celebrate people. They're made in God's image. God's put you next to them. And how do I celebrate them? Key is I ask questions. Secondly, serve people. So what's their biggest pressure? Our recycling's on a Thursday morning. Make sure the new person has it. Tonight, by the way, it's Thanksgiving as we're recording this. My kids and I went round with flowers and chocolates to the 2 American families on the street because we're just celebrating, we're serving them, and they were just, it's lockdown, no one's visiting them, they can't do a party, and we just turned up with some flowers. Well, it just, the tiny things matter. And the other thing is, here's my Bible in a year. And here's my street. So those are the numbers and those are the people on it. So the moment I meet them, I run back and I go, God's put Freddie and Becca at number 4. But so number 1, celebrate, 2, serve. But number 3 is the pain line. Ask a question. So the question at the moment, it's November, is do you celebrate Christmas? But ask a question and you might be rejected. But just have that question. One of the gay couples, a guy called I won't tell his name, but he loves flowers. And my son Peter sometimes goes and waters the flowers with him. So I'm coaching my little 8-year-old boy to say to him, Uncle Kay, where do the flowers come from? You see, so that's what you do. You send the women and children over the pain line for you. That's what you do. And then I'll pick it up. I'm sending him over. But number 4 is...
It sounds like a classically English strategy, by the way.
Yeah, strategy, yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's all about... That's how we got the empire.
Gallipoli.
Yeah. And then the 4th one is exit. Now, this is very important. So if they go quiet, and the English classically go quiet, you go quiet. But exit is Matthew 10:14. Wipe the dust off your feet. But if they say, well, I've not thought about Christmas, then ask a question. Just say, well, who did you go? I went with my granny. Well, what was she like? Just ask a question, get the thing going, start a discussion. Jesus asks 300 questions in the Gospels. So when I'm training the church family, I'm going celebrate, serve, cross the pain line with a question, exit. Keep going around that. And then the Chapo passage that has just been so... I have a rule. I teach this passage to someone each week. 2 Corinthians 4, 1-6, as he said, the most important passage on evangelism in the Bible, which is 2 Corinthians 4, verse 5, we preach Christ. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6, God opens blind eyes. So as I speak, have the confidence. God hasn't just sovereignly put me there. God will take the power that made the world to open their eyes. And as Chapo would say, well, he's done it for you, so of course he can do it for them. If he's done it for you, he can do it for them. So it's giving confidence. God's sovereign. He's put me here. When I speak of Jesus and drop that on the mat, God opens blind eyes. It's building confidence. So that's what I'm doing.
No, that's terrific. Explain for us, many people listening might not be aware of All Souls Langham Place. I don't know the context that you're working in and what the church looks like. So just give us a little bit of background to the church, and then can you explain your role in it, and I suppose in a way that can help us understand the importance of your role, and whether that's something for us to consider in our own churches. So what is your church? What's your role? How can we understand?
Yeah, we're at the top of Regent Street, and if any of you watch the BBC News 24, which is a worldwide thing, they go over our church just before the news starts.
Okay.
We were built as a thanksgiving for victory over the French at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. So we gave the French a good kicking. That's why we're here. So I wish that when the French arrive. But look, John Stott was here as a young boy and then came back as a curate and rector, and so I guess that's how we're known. It was the model church for Uncle John. Took all the stuff he'd learned at UCCF, the student movement, and he said, here's a parish church, I'll model what it means to have a biblical ministry. And I think we've really tried to maintain that. And but also with social action, very important. Uncle John said, there are two wings of the plane. We've got to preach the gospel, we've got to serve our local area. So there are 38 brothels in my parish, one per street. We're in touch with 1,200 women who many have been trafficked. So our women go in pairs, bringing cake and to the brothels each week, every Thursday night. So we're doing that. And then, of course, there are loads of homeless. We have 600 volunteers that serve the homeless. So it's that idea of what does it mean to have a ministry that proclaims and serves. So that's all souls. But at the heart of it, the power is in expository preaching. So we get the Bible out, we teach it. That's how you mobilize the church. Now, I'm an evangelist. I'm at the church, and my job is Ephesians 4, verses 10, 11, 12, to equip God's people for works of service. So it's not just to do it myself, although it's crucial that I do it and get the leaders to do it and help them do it and model it. But it's to enable the church family to do it. The evangelists who equip God's people. There's the pastor teacher in 2 Timothy 4 who's to do the work of evangelism. So I'm to be giving them material, they can do that. And then we're all to be witnesses that point to Jesus. And my job is to keep the value of evangelism high. So how do I do that? Well, brother, I keep talking about hell. I keep saying, where will people be in 100 years' time? So a lot of my talking about hell is to the church family saying, look, Jesus couldn't have loved you more, and yet he speaks about it. He's the most loving man that ever lived. He speaks about it because this is the issue. So it's doing that. Secondly, and I found that by far in my book, Honest Evangelism, by far the most traction it got was the pain line, but then chapter 3 on idolatry. Okay, why aren't you doing evangelism if you believe this? And the answer is, I found over 25 years working at All Souls, idolatry. So a good thing has become a God thing, and it's taken the place of their heart, and that's why they're not doing it. I think of a guy saying to me at our lunchtime service many years ago, he said to me, I work at a Jewish firm. To try and do evangelism would be to torpedo my own career. I cannot believe that you've asked me to do it. Well, that's just pure idolatry, isn't it? He's saying that his career is more important than some dear people perishing in hell. And the question is, what will they say to him on the day of judgment? We care more of what they think of us now than of what Christ will think of them on judgment day. So it's to just keep challenging the church family to do it, but equipping the church family to do it, and keep that value high, and find other passionate people around the church. So I've got a great Australian girl called Christine who works with me, who's terrific at mobilizing, reading the Bible one-to-one with people. So my job is to keep mobilizing the church family, keep on saying, right, what makes it, how can we do it now? We've just run an event with John Lennox from Oxford, with one of our doctors called Dr. Professor John Wyatt, just on the shadow of death, on COVID, on the science behind it, on the spiritual, on what God might be saying through this, on suffering. So we're just putting stuff on that people can get family members and loved ones too. And then from that, hoping they'll get them to Christian Explored. So
you have your church calendar where you sort of are trying to pop in proactively.
And that's a real fight to get the church calendar. So, for example, let me tell you, John Stott's 80th birthday, was in the first weekend of May, and the last weekend of April is a bank holiday here, and it meant that we did no evangelism running into the start of Christianity Explored. So we did John Stott's birthday, but we didn't think about lost people going to hell. You know, we put Uncle John's 80th before the needs of the lost. Now, my job was to then raise that with the church family and with the leadership and say, I can't believe we did this. It was a terrible thing to put his birthday then. I mean, I know that's when his birthday was, but we needed to start it then to get the course done through the summer. So I'm looking to Philippians 2 verse 4, don't look to your own interests, but the interests of others. But at the same time, I'm just saying, give me 3 2-week periods a year, Christmas and Easter, but I've got to be fighting for the calendar when we're saying as a church family, now we go, let's invite our friends.
And is the idea at these events, John Lennox's event or your Christmas and Easter, sort of classical type ones, you're advertising Christianity Explored or Life Explored at these events, and then you're just given a very simple sort of pathway to get there. Yeah.
And say it's gospel pathways. We're establishing gospel pathways. So we run lots of sport teams. You know, I love Australia. I love going there. I mean, I just think the sports are great. But you know, we run touch rugby, we run five-a-side football, we run ultimate frisbee, we run tennis. But the leaders that run that are trained so that in the 3 times a year, just before CE happens, I'll come and do, or someone will come and give a little talk at the event saying, here's the opportunity. And the sports people hear about it once and then twice and then 3 times. And then after a year and a half, they come along. But we find it takes a year and a half, 2 years to get someone to CE from when they first hear about it to when they come, maybe longer. I had a friend, it took 5 years. So we just have to stay with it. But we go on celebrating them. We do the sports. So we have all these things that crescendo for those 2 weeks before a course begins. Now, when we run an event, there are 4 P's around which we run it. Number 1, we pray. So you've got to pray, Lord God, please open blind eyes, make people hungry. May they come along. Secondly, prepared to fail. So if we run this event and it's totally a total disaster, that's fine. At least we've had a go. We've thrown some energy at it. Thirdly, passionate people. So I will go around the church family. Maybe there's someone who loves gardening. I'll say, we're going to do a gardening event, and then I'll interview him about his garden and about his faith. So whatever people that, you know, we might do, we do a little 9-hole golf event on the evening. I found when I did it during the day, all the marrieds went home, but now I run it between 7 and 9 in the middle of June, our longest night. So they've been home and then they come at 7:30. They do 9 holes till 9 o'clock. Then we have the event. It took me years to establish that was how to do it, a little 9-hole course, not an 18-hole. So you learn your lessons as you do it. And then I interview Julia, who helps me run the golf, or someone. But the key thing is I try and do that. And then the follow-up, try and do something to follow up. So it's got to be within the framework of a gospel pathway. So number 1, pray. Number 2, prepared to fail. Number 3, passion. And then, of course, the 4th one is preach Christ. So when we stand up and do the testimony, we say, we'd like you to look at the person of Christ. We you know, as Chapa used to tell, 2 Corinthians 4 verse 2, don't use distortion. We tell people straight, this is what you're coming to. You're coming to an event to ask questions about Jesus. Here's the person who in the Sermon on the Mount said, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. And when he was being murdered, he cried out for the people killing him, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. He is amazing. Come and look at him. So that's what we do, those 4 Ps. And we just keep running events. But I'm just trying to have the energy to do it and start a course.
And so for those listening who've been listening to the previous episodes, some of the stuff we use at Reach Australia is to talk about the language of the funnel. So the wide funnel at the top, which is the contact and connection events, and then that kind of gets sharper and sharper. But that period, as you said, Rico, that can go for years of people circling around the edge of it. Yeah, and some people, of course, can come for a week and come straight to the pointy end.
That's right, brother. And Chapo's greatness was that he was great at modelling liking people. He enjoyed people.
Yeah.
So pray for a love for people. You can't fake that. So you just got to enjoy people and stay with them and keep praying and keep enjoying doing stuff with them. You know, but you're right. Have that funnel in place. And that's where the old pastors, because they're tired, can't do it. Which is where the young have just got to say, can I have permission to run this golf event? I'll run it. But the point about the older boys is they're knackered. It's, you know, they run out of energy. So you've got to have young people who love the pastor, who set up the events, maybe say, well, look, you speak or get someone to do it, but take ownership, because these events take energy. It all takes energy.
Yeah. And one of the things we've had probably, I think here, Rico, is over the years, people have put a lot of energy into these upper funnel events, contact connect events, whether it be Christmas, whether it be, and then when it gets to the pointy end, the evangelism course, they've lost their energy by then. So it's kind of like a joke without the punchline, you know, so.
That's interesting. Now, it's interesting. In the book, Honest Evangelism, I always knew what my opening passage would be. It was always going to be Luke 15, 1-9, where there's an all-out search for the sheep and an all-out search for the coin. And that is evangelism in London. You have to stick with people.
Yes.
Now, let me give you my classic example. We had a girl called Anna, and she came and her daughter was getting baptized, and Anna came on a Christianity Explored course, then did another one, then she got converted, then she did Discipleship Explored, then she went and did our Springboard course, then she came back and led with Graham, her husband, on a Christianity Explored, and they got engaged and got married, and this was their baby, Eloise, who was born. And so I'm sitting there on the day of the baptism thinking, here is the model vindication of all the courses I've set up. I've said, I'm always fainting with self-righteousness as I interview her, waiting to say, and here she is, you know, and it was all these courses. Anyway, Anna gets up and she says, it's wonderful to be here today. It's wonderful to have the baptism. Really, I'm here because of Holly. And she points to someone who I've never heard of in the front row, who I met on a bus 8 years ago. And she told me to do all these courses. And after I'd done the courses, stayed in touch as a friend and then put me on the next one and got me to lead. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking everything I did, well, they were just the structures, but it was the relationship of Holly with Anna. That's what brought her through. And I didn't even know Holly existed.
Wow.
And that was a bit of a moment for me. So it's developing that one-to-one stuff. Now, you're then saying, okay, Lord, who's the Spirit at work in? Because those people become my priority. I'm still trying to love the other friends and make relational deposits. But this guy at the moment, it does seem to be the one, you're the evangelist whom you're calling. So I'm on this person.
Yeah. Rico, just two final questions. The first one is you've talked, and a long part of your ministry has been about training and equipping from Ephesians 4, that you're equipping the church for works of service. Down here in the promised land of Australia, a lot of us have lethargy about training. We've done a lot of it, and often we find it very difficult. We don't see much fruit from it. And so if we've got a competition, do I put something on, or do I train people and put something on? Well, it just seems simpler to just put the thing on and then invite the people. How important is training? What should we expect from our training? And what have you give us your wisdom about what to do to train people well?
Well, brother, that's a great question. And I don't think I've done it very well. But I do think that they really have to believe in hell. So don't remove that word from your preaching, and don't remove the tears. Secondly, and this can be in the Sunday preaching too, so one thing is hell, that's one key word. Another key word you've got to keep repeating is confidence. And it's the confidence that the sovereign God is the evangelist. Acts 17:24-27. He's put me here and he's put them there. And what's going on in history is people are coming to Jesus. When I started believing that, Dave, that transformed my evangelism. And 2 Corinthians 4 transformed my evangelism. So I would say, you know, we preach Christ, God opens blind eyes. I keep doing that. I say, our job is to speak of Jesus. God will do the miracle. He did it in you. So a second key word is confidence. A third key word is identity. So this may not be that you're running a training course, but you've got to keep saying to people, it's in the grace of God. So, you know, you make a choice in life. Either you spend your life fearing God or you spend it fearing men. You'll do one or the other. My advice is to fear God. And actually, it's interesting, isn't it? When it says in Luke 12, verse 5, when it says, you know, fear him who has the power to throw you into hell, then it says, and think of the sparrows. So as you fear God, you're more precious than the sparrows. He knows every hair of your head. which is probably more comforting to some than others as I speak. I think Dave Mansfield, it's not much comfort to Dave Mansfield, but what I'm saying is, brother, is that there are certain key words, and it may not be that you're doing this training on a course, but you're saying, I'm going to keep talking about the pain line. I'm going to talk about confidence, 2 Corinthians 4, Acts 17. I'm going to keep talking about hell, and I'm going to say that's the issue. Do you see what I mean? So there's certain messages you just stay on.
Yeah.
And then
you go. Sorry.
And then, of course, you have the church calendar, and there's certain points you do training. Although I have to say, with my training now, I mean, I do quite a lot of one-off evenings just to keep people going. We were amazed. We got 160 to a one-off. I just said evangelism in a time of COVID. Now, the funny thing was, Dave, I didn't know what I was going to say. I put it in the diary 6 weeks before because I thought, well, I've got to do something. I made sure it wasn't recorded because I thought it was going to be. And actually, the guy who really helped me was the guy. Who's the guy? Is it Chan in Sydney? Who's Dave?
Sam Chan.
Yeah. He was the best. Sam Chan with The Onion, that you've got people's on the outside, their interests, never going beyond that. Second level is actually their values. In the middle is the worldview. So I just put it in the diary and said, I'm just going to do it that night. And Sam Chan was brilliant. I thank God for that man.
Brilliant. Yeah, he's wonderful.
Superb. What a blessing he is. So I just used his stuff, but with an English accent. And but I'm just saying, I just put it in the diary and said, I'm just going to do it that night. So keywords you keep doing. At certain times you turn the heat up, then you serve all the other areas. Get courses in the calendar, just keep running them, and find passionate people to model.
Yeah. Final question I'll ask, Rico.
Brother, do it yourself. When you're on the golf course, when I'm on the golf course trying to do this, it's refreshing. I love golf, but I have a rule. I only really play with non-Christians. So that means it's evangelism. I only play golf with non-Christians, really. And I'm not trying to be pompous, but I just rugby mates or whatever. And I come back so refreshed. But actually, that just keeps me having people to ask. Last question, brother.
If you're, most of our listeners will be pastors or leaders in churches. I mean, All Souls is a big church, and most churches in Australia, evangelical churches, would be between 70 to 120, one staff member. They're hearing this, they're encouraged, excited, but intimidated, thinking, my goodness, I can't possibly do this. What's your, I suppose, one thing? The one thing that as they're reviewing their current evangelistic calendar, they're looking forward to the year ahead or the middle of the year when they listen to this. What's the first thing, just the one thing that you'd say, listen, you need to do this, put this in place?
Yeah, model it yourself, brother. Model it yourself. Now, Chapo's story is very interesting on this. Okay, so Chapo told me this once. He was in the States and he went to one church. It was absolutely full of people that brought friends. And then he went the next week, did a mission in another church, full of people that brought friends. And so he rang up the first guy and he said, how have you brought so many, how come so many people have come? And the guy said, we've run training events and I got them all ready for it and built up for it. And then he rang up the next guy and the guy said, well, if people haven't got the gift for evangelism, I don't ask them to do it. And Chapo was like, but the place was full of non-Christians. And he realized the reason the church family brought their friends was the pastor brought his friends.
Yeah.
It's the plausibility. If they see you do it, they'll do it. So go to the wardens and say, I want half a day off a week to regularly be chess club, golf club, tennis, and that'll be good for your health, but then you'll be bringing friends. And if the pastor's doing it, the church family will do it. And I think that's, and also it'll be better for your health. So, brother, honestly, that's what I'd say. Now, if you're thinking, Rico, I've just got too much on, John Stott said, every generation needs to relearn the lesson of Acts 6, verse 4, where the work of tables was delegated in order to do the work of prayer and sharing of the word. So what can you delegate or stop doing? My dear brother, I know your life's absolutely full, but what can you, Uncle John Stott would say to you, it's delegate. You've got to delegate. What can you stop doing or delegate so that you can be doing modeling evangelism and doing it? Yeah.
Brother, you've been a great blessing to all of us. But here in Australia, we love you. Can I just recommend, if you're listening or watching this, honest evangelism is, I think, Our Generation, if you like, Setting Hearts on Fire. I mean, it really is a terrific book that you should get your hands on. And we'll put a link to how to do that in the show notes on this that you'll be able to find. If you are looking to grow your church in evangelism, Reach Australia would love to help in any way possible. Go to reachaustralia.com.au for more details of that. Rico, thanks very much, brother. It's been wonderful to chat with you.
Brother, it's an absolute pleasure. The thing I didn't talk about was prayer, of course. I mean, we've got to say our prayers, haven't we? So as Chapo said, if you're not in bed by 11, you're not going to say your prayers next day, because if you don't say in the morning, you don't say them. So he would say, how are your prayers going? So brothers, that's the other thing. Sisters, let's be praying too. And please pray for me that I'll say my prayers as I say to you, say yours.
That's wonderful. God bless you, Rico. Thanks, brother.
Pleasure.
If you would like to find out more about evangelism and how Reach Australia can help your church be more equipped to reach the lost, please get in touch. Go to reachaustralia.com.au and we'd love to begin that conversation with you. See you later.